Well, I'm glad you guys got the memo on the on 845, or maybe people got the memo but they conked out already. All right. We are coming close to a close. We are on Nundalan Amid Bays 54b. Basically, we pick up with this idea that the Mishnah said that there's no day on the Jewish calendar that they will blow more than 48 blasts in the Beis Hamikdash. And the Gemara continues to challenge this point. The Amos even so that's what the Mishnah says. We don't add more than 48 blasts. Below, is that actually true? But wait a minute, when Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, the either Rabbi Huda, Chamshin v'chada, either Rabbanon, Chamshin v'sheva. No matter how you slice it, according to Rabbanon, it'd be 57, and even according to Rabbi Huda, it's still 51. Either way you slice it, we have a day on the Jewish calendar that indeed exceeds 48 blasts. What do you know? So what do we say to that? But what kind of days was the Mishnah talking about? Kikatani, Mida de Isabachol Shana. We're talking about something that falls out every year. Erev HaPesach Chalios B'Shabbos, Elis B'Chol Shana V'Shana Lokatani. But certainly not every year does Pesach fall out. Sorry, does Erev Pesach fall out on Shabbos? In other words, that Pesach falls out on Sunday. That doesn't happen every year. And our Mishnah was only talking about annual occurrences. But then the Gemara challenges it and says, Atu, Erev Shabbos Sukkah Chag Mi Isa B'Chol Shana. Is it true that Erev Shabbos falls out in middle of Sukkot every year, B'Chol Shana? Zimnin D'lo Mishkachas. Later instances where it doesn't happen, B'Yechidami, Kagon, Shechal Yontif Rishon B'Erev Shabbos. Let's say Yontif Rishon actually falls out, the first day of Yom Tov Sukkot could fall out on an Erev Shabbos. And if so, we have a day in which we're not getting 48 blasts. So sorry. So the question, right? So the issue is we have a bit of an inconsistency over here. If we're really just let me rephrase that. It seems that this day does not occur every year. So if our Mishnah is only counting days that have 48 blasts that occur on an annual consistent basis, the example provided in our Mishnah of Erev Shabbos falling out in middle of Sukkot doesn't necessarily occur every year either. So what gives? But it depends on how you structure your Jewish calendar. Ki mikla, right? This is how we have the luach, but now we're to know when you say avarachimim and when you say this and that, right? So now we're looking under the hood. All right, how do they figure these things out? So we're looking at some of the inner mechanics over here. Ki mikla Yontif Rishon b'Erev Shabbos. So when Yontif Rishon falls out of Sukkot falls out on Erev Shabbos, midchi dochinonle, they actually will push it off. That's not going to occur. It actually does happen every year. You'll never have Erev Shabbos and the first day of Sukkot coinciding. Why? My time came into Ikla Yontif Arisha Shalchad Lios Erev Shabbos. Because what happens is, if you do the math, if you count back a few days, if Yontif Rishon of falls out on Erev Shabbos, that means Yom HaKippurim Emas Havi B'Chad B'Shabbos. That means Yom Kippur is going to fall out on Sunday. And Hilkach Dochinanle. So therefore, we always will push days off on the calendar because we don't want Yom Kippur right after Shabbos, right? You want to cook yourself a really good meal beforehand. You don't want to eat Shal Shudas, right? I always thought those are the cruelest Tisha B'Avs. When you have to have that early Shal Shudas and you're basically just having, I guess, the Sudas Mav Sek is not supposed to be so good anyway. The Shal Shudas food is quite apropos. You're about to go into Yom Kippur, it'd be a shame to go right from Shabbos into Yom Kippur. So they ensured on the calendar that you would never have an instance in which Erev Shabbos falls out on the same day as the first day of Sukkot. Now, the Gemara, that's basically the end of it. But the Gemara goes on to ask, wait a minute, is it true that we will push off the days artificially? But not. We have a Mishnah. The Mishnah is in Shabbos, Kufya Gimel Amud Aleph. It's not because I know Shas by my fingertips, but because there's something called the Masoros HaShas, which is very helpful. If you want to check out the Gemara, don't believe me. So the Mishnah there says, Chel Shabbos Krivu Yom Kippurim, that the fats of the karbanos that were left over from Shabbos could be brought in Yom Kippur. In other words, that means Yom Kippur fell out after Shabbos, which means it falls out on a Sunday, which means we're not artificially changing the calendar for this purpose. That's question number one. V'amar Razer ki avina be'Rav beBavel hava amri. So when Rav was in Bavel, he said, sorry, I just Haditanya, that which it's taught in the Brisa, Yom Kippurim shechalios Erev Shabbos and Yom Kippurim, that it's supposed to fall out on Erev Shabbos. L'hayu token, they would not blow tekiyas. But Matzei Shabbos, and when it falls out on Matzei Shabbos, in other words, Sunday, L'hayu mavdilim, they would not make a havdalah. Devar Akoli, and this is in accordance with everybody. And he says it's in accordance with Rabbi Akiva. Point being of this is that we have two instances in Chazal that Yom Kippur falls out on Sunday for Karbanos and for Havdalah purposes. Just, nonchalantly talking about other halachos, what do you know? Yom Kippur can fall out on a Sunday. So what's the answer? Lo kasha. Ha-rabbanon ha-achirim. It's machlokus. That always saves us. The Tanya, the others say, there can only be 4 days pushed off at most. And it would be, in a leap year, it'd be 5 days at most. But the point being is that according to the Rabbanan, who we paskin by, we could play around with the calendar more so if needed. In other words, so the way we paskin is that Yom Kippur could be pushed off away from Sunday, which means that we have the power to alter the calendar. And if we never want Yom Kippur to occur on a Sunday, it means you can never have, just by count the days. That means Erev Shabbos can never coincide with the first day of Sukkot that way. So, and that means when our Mishnah counts Erev Shabbos in middle of Sukkot as a prime example of 48 blasts, that is because it is a consistent annual occurrence. And that's why that's the example of the Mishnah, as opposed to Erev Pesach that falls out on Shabbos, which is not an annual occurrence. This whole long arichos, that was a double, that was superfluous, was just to get to that point. That our Mishnah is only giving example of consistent days that have 48. And so you might find me a day that has more than 48 blasts, but it's not an annual occurrence. Okay? And if you want your head to really spin, there's a lot of crazy calendar stuff going on here. But I'll be honest, I was happy just sufficing with what it says in the Gemara and not going too much into the calendar, because then things get too complicated for me also. Okay. Let's see. Oh, wow.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. I understand we're talking about Shabbos and Yom Kippur. This is not an issue with Shabbos and a Chag, right? But the Chag is also Kol Melecha D'Avodah Lo Tasu.
Well, Yom Kippur is unique. The Yom Kippur actually has an issue of malacha on it, though it's punishable by kares. Just trying to check one thing over. Yeah.
Is this all driven by cooking or working?
Okay, so where's Rashi on this? Let me check this up. We're being referenced to Gemara Rosh Hashanah, but I don't have the Gemara Rosh Hashanah on me, so we're going to cheat a little bit. One moment. The basin did not want. It says in Rosh Hashanah. Okay. Footnote. Oh boy. Okay. When they would be Makdish a Chodesh based on the Molad, the good old days. Beis Din would be able to aver the chodesh when needed to make a leap year. Okay, okay, this is interesting. There's also some sort of interesting concerns that if you have Shabbos and Kippur right next to each other, if someone Chas v'Shalom dies Friday night, you can't bury him for another 2 days. Now the interesting thing is you're going to be, wait a minute, can't that happen other times also? So there actually is a notion of burial on Yontif or like Yom Tov Sheni. So there is but apparently they were concerned that for burial later came. Oh no, and why and why? In bo im shuros alvanav yom shloshim based on alim sheachrishu. Okay, I have to check with the Gemara and Rosh Hashanah. It's not about the cooking though. It seems that would just me making up my own reason to illustrate why I'm grateful for it. Okay, let's wrap up the Gemara for tonight. One more question. Meisvei. So this is referring back to what we learned last time. If you look back, or you don't have to look back, just take my word for it. Nun Dalet Amud Aleph. Rav Acha Bar Chanina taught. What was Acha Bar Chanina? Yeah, he said, based on a Bryce that he had, that we add extra blasts because we acknowledge every Musaf. So if there's blasts for the Musaf Shal Shabbos, and there's additional blasts for when Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh coincide, there's additional blasts acknowledging Rosh Chodesh of Musaf. So every Musaf gets acknowledged, according to Rav Acha Bar Chanina. But Meisvei, this doesn't seem to be the case, because Rosh Chodesh, it was taught Rosh Chodesh Shechalios b'Shabbos, when Rosh Chodesh coincides with Shabbos. Shir Shel Rosh Chodesh Docha Shir Shel Shabbos. We only sing the song of Rosh Chodesh. We don't have the Shir Shel Shabbos. The Isa, and if it's true that we acknowledge all the Musafin, Lame of the Shabbos, Lame of the Rosh Chodesh, why don't we have the Shir Shel Shabbos and the Shir Shel Rosh Chodesh? Spoiler alert, next week when we get to the end of the Sugya, you might know the answer already from davening, right? What's the answer in davening? What do we say at the end of davening when Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh coincide? We say Shir Shalem Shel Shabbos, and we say Baruch Nafshi, right? So that's the halach l'maisa time. But that's going to take us to the last 4 words on Hey. Oh, thank you. On Hey Amid Aleph. But spoiler alert, not a real spoiler because you knew it already, really. But anyway, we don't know that yet. So here's the thing. No one needs to be told that Shabbos today. No one forgets that Shabbos. What people forget, though, is that's Rosh Chodesh Shechalios b'Shabbos. So therefore, we sing the song of Rosh Chodesh because that's something that people might not remember. Now, v'hayakir of dinan, ha'akir achris of din. But wait a minute, why do I need to remind everybody by only acknowledging Rosh Chodesh in the Shir? People have another way to know it's Rosh Chodesh. The Tanya, Chelbe Tamish Shel Shachar Niti Mechati Kevesh Lamatim B'Nisrach V'Shem Usav Niti Mechati Kevesh Lamatim B'Marav Shel Rosh Chodesh, and on Rosh Chodesh Nitonin Tachas Karkov HaMizbeach Ulamata. So they would place the fats from the offerings in a special place on the Mizbeach to acknowledge as Rosh Chodesh. I already have a reason why already a way to demonstrate that's Rosh Chodesh. Why do I have to now ignore Shabbos why do I have to acknowledge Rosh Chodesh at Shabbos expense? All right, if I'm Rav Yochanan, lay the Shukva Rosh Chodesh Mizmano. So the answer is Trey Hakerav Dinan. We needed 2 ways. How many people are paying attention to the inner workings of the Mizbeach? So the Chazi Hai Chazi and the Chazi B'Hai Chazi. If you're a guy who likes paying attention to the Mizbeach, then you'll know it's Rosh Hashanah Mizbeach. If you're a guy who's more musical and is listening to the song, you'll hear it through the Tehillim that they're saying Baruch Nafshi, that's Rosh Chodesh. But the point being is that at this stage in the Gemara, it sounds like the Shir of Rosh Chodesh supersedes that of Shabbos, and that we, as far as the Shir is concerned, pretend Shabbos doesn't exist. But that's not the end of the sugya. So we'll, God willing, get to that next week. Be'ez Hashem, I'm hoping to continue doing the Zoom Gemara while I'm in Allentown until I come back on Shabbos the 28th, and then we wrap up with the Siyum at Shalosh Shudas. That's the plan, God willing. But just stay tuned. I'll send an email out when I have a better sense if I need to shift the time at all. Okay? Alrighty. Shkach, everyone. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care.